So I had to visit an Amtech because a couple days ago I blew up my Marshall Silver Jubilee. Turns out that Amtech was friends with Jimi Hendrix. But that's not all. You won't believe the story. Welcome back to the channel. I hope you don't mind my little impromptu Hendrix jam right there. If you're interested in learning how to play solos, I have a cool melodic soloing guitar course down in the description if you're interested in that. Now, for all the first timers on this channel or the ones who haven't seen my last video a couple days ago, I absolutely blew up my Marshall Silver Jubilee because I wasn't aware that it was unplugged from my load box. So turned it up. It blew up and it didn't turn on anymore. So I had to visit an Amtech. The problem was my go-to guy is on vacation. It's August here in Germany. Everybody's on vacation. So I called a couple people that I know and got a recommendation for another Amtech that I visited for the first time. And to get that out of the way, I got real lucky. It was only 2 fuses. Everything else worked perfectly fine. Transformers are okay. Nothing is damaged. The amp is in perfect condition. Just needed 2 fuses. Lucky me. But I hadn't really time to be happy about that just because I visited that Amtech and we got into a conversation and it turns out he was friends with Jimi Hendrix. And here is how that went. I walk into that shop and we put the Marshall on the workbench and he starts unscrewing stuff and I have some time to just look around. I see the usual stuff that you see in these repair shops from these amp guys. You know, there's like tubes and resistors and wires and radio stuff. So I keep walking around in the shop while he's unscrewing my Marshall and I see 2 pictures on the wall with Hendrix and his band, the Jimi Hendrix Experience. And these pictures were somehow intriguing just because there was the band, so Hendrix, there's Noel Redding, there's Mitch Mitchell, and then there's 2 other guys that I couldn't quite identify. So I turn around and ask him, hey, who are the other 2 people on that picture with the Jimi Hendrix Experience? And you have to imagine, while he's doing work on the workbench with my Marshall, he's just chuckling like, hey, that's me and my friend. And I'm like, what? And he goes, yeah, that's me and my friend in 1967. And I'm like, there's no way. How did that happen? And in my mind, I was thinking, maybe after a show, just picture with fans or something like that. And then he says, no, his management actually called us. Turns out my Amtech was the bassist of a pretty professional and successful local beat band in the 60s here in Berlin. He told me the band name, but I don't remember. I didn't write it down, but they were pretty successful in the Berlin area. And apparently the Hendrix management called the manager of the band of my amp guy. And since this was 1967, Hendrix and his band were still driving around in vans, so they didn't carry a lot of equipment. And basically what Hendrix management was asking was if they could actually borrow the PA from that beat band that my Amtech used to play in. So eventually they come to an agreement and the Hendrix band can borrow their PA. So they meet up at this venue in Berlin that still exists today. It's called Huxley's Neue Welt. Back then it was only called Neue Welt. So they met up there and Hendrix was scheduled to play 2 shows that day in the same venue, which in the 60s was pretty usual. And after both shows were over, the Hendrix band pretty much invited them for dinner. So they went to dinner and this is where the story gets a little bit creepy and where you can see how funny life gets sometimes. As my Amtech is describing to me where they went for dinner, I am realizing the location he's describing is like 300 meters away from where I live, right here. The problem was he didn't remember the name of the restaurant, so I couldn't go poking around and see if that restaurant maybe still open. But being the rock and roll history nerd that I am, I did a little bit of research. The only thing he still remembered was that it was some sort of a Yugoslavian kind of restaurant, so Eastern European cuisine, if you will. So obviously, I don't know anybody who lived in this area that I'm living in back in the 60s. So I went to Facebook and found this group where people gathered that were born and raised in this part of Berlin. Went in there and asked in the group, does anybody know some Yugoslavian or Eastern European restaurant that was around that area in the 60s? Because I have a friend who went to dinner with the Jimi Hendrix Experience. And here's the thing that I still cannot believe. Turns out a lot of people knew of that place, and it's actually a place that's still open. It's not a Yugoslavian restaurant anymore. It's a Chinese restaurant at this point, but I'm walking by that place maybe 2 or 3 times a week. I'm walking by a restaurant where the amp tech that I just consulted for fixing my Marshall and Jimi Hendrix went to dinner. Isn't that absolutely crazy? But that's not the end of the story, because my amp tech apparently met Jimi Hendrix 2 more times. When you look at Hendrix's tour and how the tour was scheduled, they went back to Germany a year and a half later, so it was beginning of '69. They came back to Berlin, and again, the management of both bands communicated, and again, they went to the same place and had dinner at the exact same spot 1.5 years later. Still were friends, playing Fender Stratocasters backstage and all that stuff, the thing that you see on this picture. Just absolutely awesome to think about that. I wanted him to describe to me how Hendrix was in a relaxed restaurant dinner situation, and he basically said he was such a down-to-earth, relaxed, and calm guy that just loved to laugh, loved to talk about peace and happiness, and he was just an overall super relaxed guy. But here is the sad part about it. Around 1970 in September, so pretty much 2 weeks before he died, they again played Berlin, and my Amtech described that it was not possible anymore to get through management and get to Jimmy. Management had changed at that point, and they were trying to shield Jimmy from all the outside distractions. And my Amtech said he felt like something was off or something was wrong, and then 2 weeks later he was dead. It's pretty crazy. So at the end of the day, I walked out of that repair shop not only having a very healthy Marshall Silver Jubilee with no blown output transformer, I also had a great afternoon with the 74-year-old man that told me about his Hendrix story. And isn't it strange that in a city like Berlin, where there's 4 million people living, and it's a super spread out city with restaurants everywhere, that out of all places where they could have gone to dinner, it's a place I walk by a couple times a week. It's like very familiar. It's 300 meters down the road. It's just incredible. Absolutely couldn't believe it. But that's the story for today, guys. I hope you had fun. I hope you were subscribing. I hope you love these kinds of stories, because I certainly do. And I hope you like my little jam. Leave me a comment. And if you have a Hendrix story yourself, share it with us. And I'll see you in the next one.